Greetings. This is a Michael Miller Pilates. My name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller Pilates YouTube live presentation, broadcast, really. I consider it a broadcast. You've sometimes called it a lesson, session. I know I'm either mindless or make no sense or a fool. This is the enjoyment I have of making a fool of myself, and that encompasses my abstract view of the world and therefore Pilates. Okay. It's just me sharing my view, and beyond that, it's up to you to decide if there's anything of value in there. Right? So enough disclaimers. It's just my way of looking at things, and when it comes to your way of looking at things, you're on your own. I had such an interesting interaction with Brent Anderson, down under, Melbourne. And interacting with him and his comment about nutation as it relates to the pelvis, which I know next to zero about. Because why? Because upon my reflection, that was about biology and the specifics, the very intricate and detailed and sophisticated. I swear that's not straight. I set up Cornu vertical on a gravity line, and as I look at it, well, so there's what I would think of as the center of the hips, which is almost the center of the shoulders, and a little bit behind the end point of the ears. But alignment is perceptible. Via tension, right? So, my notes. My interaction and reflection gave me a discernment between biology and physics. That's what I'm getting at. And that I've said before that the biology accomplishes the physics. And if you know me well at all, you know that my interest is more in thinking of the method or understanding it through the physics and rely on the biology to come together to accomplish that. Now, I know that most of the world is interested, the Pilates world is interested in the biological aspects of Pilates. To that extent, they go under the hood of the vehicle. They go under the skin. They go subcutaneous. And they look at all the stuff that happens under the hood. With my brush against hearing someone talk about the pelvis in anatomical terms and the biology of the hip area. It made me, from my perspective, from my abstraction of seeing core tension, and as though there's only two planes, you know, the one you're facing and the one on the sides, and that the rotation that you control is only at those endpoints. When it comes to the hips, what I think of as the core is an establishment of the condition of the ability to control rotation around this axis, the hip axis. Now, core is just going to have to be laid back because I want to feel more straight up and down in me and have the camera feel that way too. It's stunning to see the result of the evolution that it takes to accomplish movement in the body. Now, I would say to accomplish the grip of the hip. So if she's leaning forward, I would want her. So one of my solutions to this issue is to just put a pin at the ears and let it hang from the ears. Because core tension between shoulders and ears, it's the ability to pull to pull rotation at the ears, and in connecting to the shoulders oppositionally becomes core tension. But the core tension between ears and shoulders, the rest of the body hangs off of that. And the engagement of the core at the hips is the source of the strength of that endpoint supports that lift up and away, the famous decompression of Pilates work. So I think what am I trying to do? To help you understand where Michael Miller Pilates' view of Pilates fits into the rest of the Pilates world, if it does at all, or perhaps it is what it is and we all live off of that. In my notes with this were, what's your target? So as a teacher, what's your target? And if you're, as an instructor, then you're giving instructions. And to me, that's my description of my job title. I'm a Pilates instructor. Now, if you want to think and you want me to teach, that's a thinking thing. But the essence of the work, to me, is the quality of your instruction to achieve, to me, the effect that you're after in the moment, which is the complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit, right? You know all this. It's so miraculous. It's stunning to see how the biology evolves to the point of being able not only to control the dynamic around one axis, there, like that, right? See? An autologous shell gets through space by having enough width to maintain balance in that axis, So the rotation is controlling the axis. Rotation establishes the axis, in my opinion. And as such, as a Pilates instructor, you want to know what you're doing. You at least want to feel like you know what you're doing. You want to have confidence. And to me, nothing has given any of my students more confidence than informing them that there's an ideal within Joe's original work. And to the extent that you mirror that ideal, I believe I'm teaching Pilates. So to that extent, knowing your target helps. And to this whole biology and physics thing, it's just my own point of view, and it's not my main interest to go subcutaneous. You know, Einstein didn't feel he needed to know how every muscle in his leg worked as much as just being able to get from A to B. And so, whatever your fancy, be it physics or biology, to really embrace the biology, I think it's necessary to acknowledge the physics in which the biology exists, because I believe that the biology evolves to accomplish what it wants to in the physics of the world that it finds itself. Okay? I always hear the arguments before I make the suggestion that biology is a subset of physics, and that biology happens within the realm of physics. That was like number one, which is on the Facebook title will be core and, biology and physics. Number two, breathing. Science shows now that not only is the universe expanding, but the universe is expanding at an accelerated rate. Accelerating. It's not just expanding at a rate, but the rate at which it's expanding is accelerating. And it's only an image in my mind that I entertain to reinforce that I'm part of the environment that I'm in, the physical world, to the point that I think in inhalation, there's that curve of inhalation that can have an accelerating capacity to it or a nature to it, a progression to it. The quality of the progression of the inhale is accelerating. And it might be just a whimsical notion at best, but to think that my inhale in its inhalation is expanding, right, with the expansion of the universe, and to the extent that my inhalation is expanding at an accelerating rate, it more syncopates with the universe that I'm in. Silly, abstract. But for me, it's nice to build imagery on what we really know about the real world, the world of the physical world, physics, and within that, biology. And I would say this to anyone that attracts critics that seem to want to pick out flaws. more than contribute to. Maybe it's their contribution. So there you go. Critics contribute in the way that they know how. And I'm sure they're doing it with the best of intentions. Because surely they wouldn't feel jealous or threatened to the point where they would try to tear down another's work. That was all 20. Okay, and then 30. The last, okay. Number 3, out of 3. It's about the number 3, I guess, because the title is 3 things from Joseph Pilates and you're good to go. 3 things from Joe and you're good to go. Now, you may find this recording long after I made it, or you may be listening to it live. But think about it in terms of if your interest in Pilates has had you stumble upon my point of view, which suggests an ideal within Joe's original work, and I can say that 3 things from Joe, from his original work, and you're good to go. I know it takes a lifetime of experience and inquiry and exploration to become the perfect creature you are in the moment. But when you have a mental understanding of this point of view of the ideal, and that ideal comes from or assumes 3 things in Joe's original work, right out of his one book. What are those 3 things? His definition of his method. Contrology is complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit. Period. The next paragraph. Contrology develops the body uniformly. Blah, blah, blah. But all you need is the statement that his method develops the body uniformly, because that makes to me a promise that in doing his method, you get uniform development, right? And then number 3, of the 3 things that you get from Joe that make you good to go, is the sequence of his method, the sequence of the mat, the sequence. The sequence matters. The sequence, along with the exercises, are the message of the choreography of his method. If he really wanted to protect it, he should have talked to his buddy Balanchine about patenting the choreography of his mat work. The sequence, documented by Joseph Pilates himself, dates to the whole 40 years of his professional career. I mean, 2 recordings, 40 years apart, same sequence by Joe. So that's one of the 3 things. The contrology develops the body uniformly, leads you right down the path to fluorescence, uniform engagement that happens because of tension between endpoints. You can describe it any way you want to, and you can make of it whatever you want to. But this is Michael Miller Pilates, and this is the ideal view that it holds is there in Joe's original work. Now the clincher, the number 1 thing, of the 3 things from Joe and you're good to go, is his definition. First of all, he called his method contrology. In sign language, control is this. Imagine that. And that contrology is complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit. Now here is where Michael Miller Pilates makes a refined distinction about what spirit means, as evidenced by the science of physics these days, of quantum physics, and the presence of the observer, the fact of the observer. And that the observer, be it brain or field, is necessary to achieve the experience of Pilates as complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit, as a state of being in the moment of the doing. Right? I still deliver them poorly, but the idea is there. And that you're after that experience, and the experience happens in the moment, and the moment and the thing that connects you to the moment is spirit. And spirit is the observer, the listener, the observer that's paying attention to situational awareness, the concentrator, the being focused, the lost in the flow of it, but the presence of the moment that is required is part of, I believe, my capacity as a human. And it's the way I interpret spirit, as the capacity in the human to pay attention. Surely you know there's a distinction between paying attention and not paying attention. That capacity in the human to pay attention and be focused and concentrate and observe is spirit. In the Michael Miller view of Pilates. And how great it is that I can freely express that and have it come to you as a recording wherever you are in the world for free. So those were my three things to talk about today. One was my gratitude for, now that I want the word, I can't think of it, but for the word that I'm familiar with in terms of nutation, of the nutation of a planet. And it's like a vibration of frequency that keeps it in balance. And that physics at the hips is like a planet that struggles to stabilize something that is likely to nutate, is not, or more likely to nutate, like anything in space, like a planet. And then that took me to the gimbal of a gyroscope. And the inherent stability that comes from rotation around an axis. Rotation stabilizes movement. Uniform eccentric loading flowing through progressive patterns of movement is my best take on what the ideal is within the work of Joseph Pilates. And the flowing through part is a reference to spirit, because if you don't press the flow, the mind doesn't let go, and it all stays a mental thing, where you need to be flowing fast enough, not reckless, not dangerous, but you need to be pressing a flow in order to engage the listener. And the flow only needs to be 1/2 of a breath. As you inhale, lift your arm. That sounds simple, but it takes me to a dear man in Indonesia that came in with 2 daughters as crutches, victim of a stroke. And really only one arm could he move at all, volitionally. If it weren't for my view of Pilates, I would have died under the challenge of being relevant to the range of clients I've had approach me in my career. And in this instance, it made me think of someday Pilates with 5 people, 1 person to manipulate each limb and the head. So that even if the body itself had no neuromuscular capacity to do the movement of the sequence of Joe's mat, that merely moving the body in that sequence would yield the benefit of moving through that sequence, of course. Anyway, lost in the moment with this gentleman and desperate to try to make some kind of connection with him, because he looked at me with the look of hope in the eyes of escaping one's plight. And so when he said he couldn't move his legs or one arm he couldn't move, I said, well, that's pretty limited. I said, how about your arm? Your other arm, can you move your arm? I said, can you lift your arm? And he lifted his arm. I'm like, okay, so where does that take me? I said, can you control when you breathe? Right? So I says, breathe in. And he breathed in. And I said, breathe out. And he breathed out. And so, and again, this futile hope. And so my point of my story, not to be melodramatic, was my part 3 of that experiment, that training moment, was I said, okay, now, can you inhale while you're lifting your arm? And that's the magic. That's Yoda into the cave. That's asking a person to listen to their own sensation and coordinate their effort, to control their effort from what they sense. And sure enough, the gentleman inhaled and lifted his arm, and then I think I probably went into either more of that cave stuff, but certainly I think also told him, I said, that's probably the key thing about Pilates I would ever teach you, is that you have to be the one directing and directing your movement by sensing where you are in it. And so your breath is a cycle, right? Goes up and down. And so recognizing where you are in the cycle of your breath, and where you are in your arm being up and down, when you have to pay attention and match those 2 things, you have to listen, you have to observe. And that capacity, I think, is human. Actually, I think it's beyond human, because we see the presence of observation in others beyond human, animals and plants, right? So I don't know what it is, and I don't want to go there. I don't need to understand all that as a Pilates instructor. All I care about is trying to instruct a person in the performance of the Pilates method. And so if a person is totally fragile, I'm still headed toward the day when they'll be able to do the mat on their own. And before that, I'm headed to where they'll be able to do enough of the mat where they can press the flow to find the fusion of body, mind, and spirit. Because that's half, if not most of, or all of the challenge of surviving, is being present in the moment. It helps to use your mind too. And it helps if your body's healthy too, see? Okay, so. Alright, so. if all you care about is biology, which is what I care very little about in a way, I mean, I've been to my share of body worlds. I have my coloring book, like you do, right? And I started the brain coloring book just for the fun and the education of it, so I encourage you to try that. That's a good book. And for me, the point about Pilates is that the biology accomplishes the physics in order to survive and to move with joy and exaltation once one gets done running from the tigers. That number 2 thing about I think I went past it. Contrology develops the body uniformly. That takes you to fluorescence, because to get uniform development, you have to distribute the load of the body as evenly throughout a uniform musculature as possible, and that happens through core new tension. Again, if you're listening, if you don't believe me, that's fine, but this is what I look at, and this is what I try to promote to you. And that core new tension, all by itself, forget about Pilates, is the physics of body dynamics that facilitates our movement. Number 2 was expansion and accelerating, and okay, now I'm covering 2 different sets of 3, and I'm sure that's confusing. So just breathing. And now, no matter how you're breathing, that the breathing is an expansion of tension, or an engagement into tension, and that from that tension, the breathing tension, you further, I'm getting all hype on, you further your ability to distribute your load and to be more fluorescently engaged. And personally, my opinion, everything I guess is, my opinion is that when you engage core new tension, there's an implicit fluorescent effect to that at a physical level. At least it distributes or at least the musculature is engaging in that effort. Finds more engagement. And in finding more engagement, takes away from that floppy arm thing, blah, blah. I hope someday you get to be a licensed affiliate and hold Core New up on your website or in your certificates as a distinction that you understand the physics that the biology takes place in. That's what I would hope, I guess. Because I think it would, brushing up against the biology, help me appreciate the miracle of the biology and more clearly see the physics that it attempts to achieve. I hope that does for you too, right? Ever be it so. Life can't live forever. Read between the lines. And if the 2 lines happen to be axes running through your body like shoulders and ears, explore sensationally for yourself looking to discover a sense of alignment that comes from core new tension. See behind the curtain. There's always a curtain. think that's the distinction between what's out there and what we observe. But that's for another broadcast. Add 2 and 2. Add 2 and 2. If it doesn't make sense to you, why not? Because the great thing about Michael Miller Pilates is that it makes sense. It makes sense tactily, and it makes sense intellectually, and I would have you have that same kind of confidence as a Pilates instructor, period. Direct your thinking, right? Know your target. That's a refinement to direct your thinking. Direct your thinking means if you don't direct it, it won't necessarily stop, but it can take you down in spirals, and it can take you in distractions and detours. So if you don't direct your thinking, it takes a lot longer to get to wherever you hope to get to, if you hope to get anywhere. Blah, blah. And then last but not least, Geist, which is spirit, which in a German dictionary is one's mind's eye, but it's that whole amygdala, hippocampal, reptilian part of the brain that feeds the mind, body, mind, and spirit, or it's the observer as a field. I don't know, I don't care. I just know that, as Joe says, if you're not concentrating on the purpose of the exercise when you're doing it, you're missing the whole point. And if I heard from someone in the audience, if I heard you ask me, well, what's the point or what's the purpose? To me, the purpose is always complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit as a state of being in the body in the moment of the doing. So you're always gunning for the right here and now. And you won't find many people, you won't find many instructors that are good at leaving the intellect and instructing behind, and being able to the student to fulfill their my aspired to goal of delivering that experience, right? The more I look at the web and the more I look out there, it's just amazing how Joe's method, whatever, has become so much and so varied, and so it's 10,000 things. I'm comforted and confident because of that, because of my view of Pilates, because it gives my interpretation of the definition, the promise, and the sequence. Those 3 things from Joe, and you're good to go. Those 3 things take you right to the essence of the experience. And that's, I believe, is what it's all about, is that experience. And everything else in the pursuit of that experience is the derivative that many people pay a lot of attention to. Like what happens to your body, and what happens to your state of mind, and what happens to the way you move. All of that is derivative to pursuit of the moment that you're in. I need a tuning fork. Because doing a Pilates workout sets up a vibration. Sets up a vibration to the extent of fluorescence, and that make no mistake, the actual doing of Pilates takes a great deal of control and refinement and practice and dedication. It takes a routine, which means it takes a repetition through time. I pretty much have a daily thing going on with the intermediate reformer. Coming up on a year, believe it or not. And on weekdays, broadcasting out to you. Be you in YouTube now or in Facebook before. Isn't it funny how before is back there behind us? all that from director thinking. I'm trying to say goodbye. Well, my word ends with Geist, and that's the spirit of body, mind, and spirit. And understanding that is the whole key to what I would give you as a means of distinguishing yourself in the Pilates world as a Pilates instructor. Good luck with that.